Hello there. We're back to St Paul's. Now, I've drawn this before and it felt like unfinished business. I didn't feel as if I did it justice. So I'm back now looking at the grand west face, and we're going to do things a little bit differently because, well, of course we are. Why do it the same? To begin with, we're going to be using an A2 size. Now, A2 is, 16 inches by about 24 inches. So twice the size I'd normally do an urban sketch. And we're not going to start with a pencil laydown, sort of pencil structure, just to give ourselves some pointers. We're going to go straight in there, and I'm going to go straight in with paint. And that's because I want this to be a more painterly sketch. I still class it as a sketch because I still feel the same way when I'm doing the painting, even though I'm going to be using largely a brush and paint, although I will get the pens out at some point. But I want to bring some of the freedom that comes with paint to the sketch, and the most obvious way to do that is with the brush, because I think that the building is very geometric and structured in itself, and if I do my usual kind of urban sketching style, it's going to end up just being, I don't know, a little flat and a little too architectural, a little too much like an illustration, and I'm desperately trying to make this a little bit more artistic in its representation. Now, the paint we're using is acrylic gouache, a brand called Himi, which promotes itself well on the internet. It's not classified as a professional paint, nor is it really a children's paint, somewhere between the two, I guess. It's very much for the craft group, I think. It has such a wonderfully bright set of colours. The little pots that the paints come in feel very jewel-like, very precious and special. When I paint with these, it feels relaxing. The paints are not particularly expensive, and they don't feel precious in that way. So I can sort of mix them and blend them in a way that feels very casual, and it relaxes me. And because they're gel based, they really don't dry out. Well, they do, but it takes months and months for them to dry out in the paint palette. But they dry very fast on the paper on which I'm painting here. So they have this real benefit of being basically like an acrylic paint that dries quickly when you use it, dries quickly when you want it to. But unlike acrylic paint, you're not continuously unscrewing tubes of paint every 2 minutes, that which can become super annoying. And me being me, I'll always drop some of those lids and they go rolling off down the street in a super annoying way. Now, because this is London, of course, and because it always happens to me, the rain falls, and I find myself, although I've started out in a nice position just to the side of the road with a nice bit of bench beside me to lay my paints on, I have to retreat under a canopy in order to not get rain on the paper, although you'll see here that there's moments when you'll see the rain physically hitting the painting. I'm never particularly upset about stuff like that. I feel as if often that's just the situation is wanting to get involved in the painting in a kind of a sweet way. So as long as it doesn't actually make the paint run, I don't mind a few drops. I think that's all part of the memory of the day. But I don't want to get wet myself, so I've got my hat on, but I'm underneath a little bit of cover just so I can keep the worst of it off myself. And in fact, I only had to be here for sort of half an hour before I could move back out again. St Paul's Cathedral was built in the 1670s, 1675 I think, on till the early 17s. So it's got a proper kind of history to it. It plays a central part in London life, both as a destination, sort of as a religious venue, but also just as a kind of iconic part of the city. Even it was for many years the kind of the tallest tower in the city, seen from everywhere. And in fact, there's only really in the last 50 or 60 years, as towers were being put up around it, that people started to sort of call for the views of it to be protected. And there are now sort of corridors of view where you can't build in, so that people can see things like the dome from certain positions. It has a protected status in that way. I guess it's probably worth me explaining why I think these are really more of a sketch than they are painting. For me, a sketch is in essence line based. It's about lines of all kinds of thickness, but it's not about sort of patches of light and dark. It's about lines that define those patches of light. So you'll see me using an angled flat paintbrush here. I think I use 3 paintbrushes throughout the whole of this painting. So they all produce a very precise, very line-like mark. And I'm using them very much as I would a line generating tool like a pen. In fact, there are moments when I actually grab a pen and start working on a pen, because in my mind it's the same process, although anybody watching me would think I'd gone mad, having painted with a brush for an hour and a half and then grabbed a pen to go over the top. This is a successful image. I particularly like the far tower, which I think is a clue to how I'll go about things in the future perhaps. It has a sort of softer, more hesitant feel to it, more dreamy feel to it, which I think is just more appropriate really for this kind of building, not try to be too architecturally precise. You'll see that the end product does have a lot of the sort of values that I would give to an acrylic sketch, an acrylic urban sketch. It does have that sense of intensity of colour. Obviously starting with the blue paper really helps that, but then sort of prioritising the blues, adding more blues on top, the blue and the white to kind of pop the architectural elements forward, creates a sort of instant, easy character, so the entire image has a sort of internal logic to it. It kind of feels like it's a designed piece in the sense that there is clearly an intention behind it. There are actually lots of subtle variations in the colours, but that's something which the blue is so dominant that you have to kind of look with special eyes to see the variations in colour, and of course again that's intentional. So here we are, coming to the end. For me, it's worked really well. It's got a charm to it. I like the far right hand side, I like the far left hand side. The only bit I'm not so happy about is all those columns, but that's not really my fault. The building's built of columns. Now this was part of the London Plein Air Painters Group Days, a group I've met with before, where everybody meets up and paints together and then throws their images down at the end. So thank you to the London Plein Air Group. It's a brilliant set of people and I had a really wonderful day, and I did St Paul's a little bit more justice than the last time I did it. So here's the final piece. I'm quite happy with it. I think the blue background worked well, using the paintbrushes as kind of sketching tools worked well, and it took about 3.5 hours, and it was a day well spent. Thank you very much for watching.